Hello and welcome to the first episode of Valorant 101, where I teach you everything you need to know about playing the game Valorant. So you just installed Valorant and you want to learn how to play the game. First off, I would like to welcome you to the Valorant community. We are glad to have you, and I hope you enjoy your time playing this game. Before we get into any game, let's cover having the correct settings. So since this is my first video, some of you might not even know if you could follow my advice or my advice is good. But just know that I've been in the top ranks of this game since its inception. Beta, I've been playing this game a lot, and I've always been in the top ranks. So just know that my advice is sound. Before we get into any game, let's cover having the correct settings. First thing I want you to do is hit the escape key. Here you'll find an array of settings here, and I'll cover each of them one by one. So one important setting is enemy highlight color. Change it away from red because red can blend into the backgrounds of the walls very easily. So change it to something like purple or one of the yellow options, and you'll have a lot easier time being able to distinguish the enemy. The first thing you want to figure out is your mouse sensitivity. A good recommended sensitivity for most beginners is 800 dpi and 0.25 to 0.4 in-game sensitivity. So at 800 dpi, you can change it from any range between 0.25 and 0.4. Like this. Me personally, I'll pay 0.42, but around this range is where most people are comfortable at. So just try things out in between that range. Next, one of the most underrated settings in this game is your map settings. So one thing I want you to keep off at all times is keep player centered. See the setting here? Keep player centered. I want this off at all times. This is because if you keep player centered, look at the top left of my screen here. If I turn on the keep player centered setting, I lose out on half the map. So I'm losing out on information on half the map, which is not good, especially in a game like Valorant. So I want you to turn that setting off, and I want you to apply settings that allow you to see the entire map at all times, no matter what position you're in. I want you to apply settings that allow you to see the entire map at all times, no matter what position you're in. So a good setting for that is 1.2 minimap size. I always max out minimap size because it makes it a lot easier to see. And I have 0.9 minimap zoom. So you can copy these settings if you want. These are what I think are the perfect settings. The one variable is rotation. So if you have trouble keeping track of your character when the map is moving around like this, you can always have the map fixed. That way the map doesn't move. Maybe you have a easier time tracking yourself or keeping track of what's going on in the game that way. So experiment with that your first couple of games. Me personally, I'll play with rotate. I just find it a lot easier to keep track of everything. I'll also have show blood on and show corpses off. This is because if you have show corpses on, you can get in the way of when you're taking a aim duel against somebody, and the body can get in the way. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. So just keep that setting on. Have show blood on. If you headshot somebody and you have show blood on versus off, you'll be able to tell a lot easier because of the blood particles. That's about it for this page. Let's head on over to controls. This is what the default keys look like for the abilities section, controls section. One thing to keep in mind for abilities is that you want them to be as easy to access as possible and not get in the way of your movement. So C, Q, E, X, these are pretty good keybinds for your abilities. However, the Q and E are what I have problems with because in order to press Q or E, you have to let go of a movement key. So if let's say you want to press Q, you have to let go of A or W to press Q, or E, same thing. So what I like to do instead is change it to a button my thumb can press. What I do is I have one of my abilities on V, another one of my abilities on X, and my ultimate ability on one of my mouse buttons. So this is because your ultimate ability, right? Usually most of the time you just press it one time. So if you use your mouse button, it shouldn't interfere with your aim a lot. However, with one of your main abilities over here, if you use mouse button for them, you press them a lot more often, so it can interfere with your aim. Second thing is you want to have your default movement mode on run, obviously. Shift walk. You can change this to alt or whatever is comfortable, but most people have it on shift Toggle walk you always want off. What's really important here is this jump setting. So by default, your jump will be binded to spacebar. However, you also want to double bind it to scroll wheel. It can be scroll wheel up or scroll wheel down. Me personally, I use scroll wheel down. You'll get this red thing here, but we'll get to that later. This is because if you have jump on scroll wheel, it allows you to bunny hop a lot easier. You see here that I changed my gun, but it's a lot easier. Also, when you move up slopes like this staircase right here, you can jump up it and make no noise. But you can't. It's hard to do with spacebar because it's hard to like time every time. So you want to use scroll wheel. That way, you can perfectly time it every time. So you'll go to your equipment tab and see that whatever you bound it to, mouse wheel up or mouse wheel down, will have this red rectangle now. So what I want you to do is unbind both of these. This is because you never want to use mouse wheel for changing weapons. So unbind these cycle to next weapon, cycle to previous weapon keybinds, and only use 1, 2, and 3 as your weapons. This is because if you use your scroll wheel to change weapons, that means you can't shoot, right? So then move your pointer finger to the scroll wheel. So always have it to 1, 2, and 3. Also allows you to go from your knife to your rifle real quickly, or vice versa. It's very useful. Also, you want to change this auto equip priority setting. Change it to strongest, because if you plant, let's say for example, you plant the spike, you do not want to be taking out your knife after planting the spike or using your ability. So always just have this on strongest. That way you have the strongest weapon out whenever you do something. Everything else here you can have to whatever you want. Oh, actually, use spike, plant or diffuse. You can keep it as 4. Me personally, I use E just because I played CSGO. Alright, for communication, this is also very important. So you want your team voice push a talk key to be put on a keybind that is either being used by your thumb or something that's very easy to press. So V would be a great keybind to use, the default one. So you don't have to change it if you don't have to. Me personally, I change it to a thumb mouse button. That way I can easily press it without having to sacrifice anything. But this V are both good options. The rest here don't really matter. Well, pings are also important. To ping the ping stuff. Yeah, you can have that as Z too. That's fine. You don't really use pings that often, so when you do, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And then, yeah, I think that's about it for the control settings. Crosshair, there's a bunch of great crosshairs you can check out. I'll put a link to a site, Crosshair database, and all you have to do is import a code. So you just have to create a new profile, import a code here, and you can make a new and you'll get that crosshair. So I'll link to that somewhere on the screen right now. Video. Okay, so for video, this is very important. Make sure your resolution is 1920 by 1080. I play on 1920 by 1080. I think this is the best resolution you can play on. Some people like playing on stretch res. I've tried it out. I did not like it. You can try it out if you want, but I think most players are very comfortable on 1920 by 1080. So just, if it really gives you a problem, then you can like look up a stretch guide, but I doubt it will give you that much of a problem. Also, keep it on fill. You don't want to be playing with black bars unless you specifically like it that way. You want to limit your frame rate here to whatever your refresh rate is. So let's say my refresh rate is 240 hertz. I would set it to 240 as max FPS, or you can set it to a little bit above, like 250. This is because if you don't want your frames overly exceeding your refresh rate, because then that can lead to screen tearing or screen buffering. So keep it at whatever your refresh rate is. If you want to find out what your refresh rate is, so to find your refresh rate, right click on your desktop, go to display settings, go to advanced display settings, and select the monitor that you are using to play the game Valorant. And once you're there, you can check your refresh rate right here. If you don't see it here, go to display adapter properties for display 2, then go to monitor, and you'll list right here too. So click the highest number that you can get, click apply, and press OK. You good? Alright, back to settings. Graphics quality. I recommend you keep settings all low, The game honestly looks better on low, so in my opinion at least, I think enemies are a lot easier to see on low. You don't want your game to look like complete dog water. You can have your anti-aliasing set to MSAA 4x and anti-shopping filtering to 4x or 8x. Just keep in mind that if you bump these numbers up, it will cost you some frames per second, some FPS, but your game will look better. So these are my current settings. I find that these work best for me. And speaking of frames per second, Valorant conveniently added this stats page where you can see how many frames you're getting. So for client, I recommend you turn client FPS to show both. That way you can see on the right here, I can see the graph of my FPS and how many frames I'm getting on the top right, on the top left, and on the top right. For audio settings, just keep it so you can hear everything. Voice chat, make sure everything's on default, or you have your you have a microphone, make sure it's set to that. So I'll set this like that. And yeah, that about does it for settings and for this video. So now that you've got the settings covered, it's time to learn how to play the game. So once again, welcome to Valorant. I hope you enjoy the plenty of hours I think you'll play. And I'll see you all in episode 2 where we cover more basics about the game.